I went to a seminar that was put on by Santa Fe, and they had a contractor there that just kind of walked through how much moisture you can add to a house by bringing in air. And it was like, oh my God, like, how did I not realize this, right? Like, we're just loading these houses with moisture because we made them so efficient. We subscribe to the ventilating dehumidifier approach in this region just because you can't bring in outside air in the Ohio Valley without auxiliary dehumidification. Like, I don't care what equipment you buy. So whenever they turn that range on, it opens a damper and it starts to bring in air. I mean, that's the only way that you could run a 1200 CFM exhaust fan in your kitchen and not create all kinds of other problems.
Yeah.
That was kind of non-negotiable.
And if you've got atmospherically vented gas appliances or a gas water heater, old school gas furnace or something like that, you are going to blow out that pilot light. You're going to backdraft the water heater. You're going to bring flue gas into your house. All right, man. Hey, what's up, Richard? Been wanting to get you on this channel for a long time. Been friends for, I don't know, 15, 16 years since I moved to Louisville. You were one of the first guys that I met, actually, kind of in the building science world. And we've worked together a lot over the years. I know you've referred me to several of your clients, and I've done the same with you. And lots of unique custom homes that we've been involved with unique custom problems. So everybody that doesn't know, this is Richard Roth from AN Roth Heating and Cooling. He is a 5th generation HVAC owner now, right? So what year was it that your family actually started that business?
So we were founded in 1866. And so, of course, back then they did not have air conditioning. We were more of a tinsmith. We do metal roofs, gutters, anything out of copper or metal. We even did some of the whatever the angel share boxes or proofing boxes that they use in the distilling for Vendome copper and brass. They'd make the big stills and we'd make the little copper parts. So didn't get into air conditioning until probably the 60s.
Well, that's when it was invented, right? Sometime around then?
Yeah.
Was it? Can't remember.
I think
Was it the
carrier,
40s?
yeah, I think it was like in the 40s, but became more mainstream in the 60s, I believe.
So early 1900s, were you guys mainly doing boiler systems, or what type of heating cooling systems were they back then?
Well, so my understanding is, I mean, yes, there were boilers, but then uh, in these homes in Louisville and Old Louisville, every house before boilers became the way of heating would have either a fireplace or like a little wood burning oven, right? So if you go into these
Right.
old homes and you see like a little port that's covered up with a metal plate and a chimney that where there's no fireplace, my understanding is we would, the well-to-do folks would have those set up in the wintertime, and then we'd come and take them out and store them during the summer. But yeah, I think people would, heat it with wood, and then they heat it with coal, and then yeah, eventually boilers and stuff became the way to do it. But back in 1866, my understanding was it was, you know, a guy with a horse and a cart, and if you went out to do work somewhere, you would basically camp there until the work was done, and then come home.
Yeah. Not exactly how they do it today, but
Yeah.
so what's it like growing up in a family that had that much history in the HVAC world like that?
Yeah, I mean, so having that many generations, of course, it ebbed and flowed. And I think by the time my father took a hold of it, he got it from his father was one of three brothers, and we have German heritage. So back then, like the oldest brother would get the family business. But my understanding is his father didn't really prescribe to that. So he kind of treated his brothers as equal partners. So by the time my dad got involved, it was very kind of poorly ran, and uh, he was kind of the only one out there doing the work. And then he kind of, brought it back. And my dad was very much into education, was very active in ACCA and going to all the conferences to try to learn from, the people that were building great businesses.
Yeah.
So by the time I came in, of course, my dad was more of like, well, I don't know if I'm doing you a favor by getting you in this business. And so I went to college and all that, but, I grew up doing it. And instead of, me going to summer camps, like my wife did as a kid, I would be riding around the truck with my dad and just, I remember back then we would literally have turtle wax and I would wax the air conditioners while he was like doing the tune ups on it. So,
Little
I
value
just grew
add
up.
for the customers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was what we did. So, yeah, I just grew up doing it. And even in high school, when I played soccer, I would work during the summers and I would go out and do rough-ins when we were doing these, new construction homes. And the guy I'd work with would drop me off at soccer conditioning when, all these other kids were just living a regular summer. But, it was fine. I like work.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gave you a leg up. I mean, I can't imagine how much you knew about HVAC by the time you were a teenager, probably.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I remember thinking about what I was gonna do in college, whether it's gonna be, an engineer and all that kind of stuff. My dad's like, "Well, we can't afford an engineer, so, you can do that, but you probably won't work here." And so I ended up getting an accounting degree and a finance minor because
Yeah.
it turned out like the mechanical stuff came relatively easy. It was all the other parts of business that I didn't know that I needed to get out of that. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy the field work. I enjoy the design aspects of the business, but it's also nice to know the numbers.
Yeah, there's a big difference between being a technician who really knows how to, turn the screws and the nuts and stuff like that and build something versus the business owner who actually can make the cash flow happen and manage the business on a weekly, monthly, yearly business or basis.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, honestly, to find somebody, especially if you're starting from scratch, who knows how to do both well. And I think that's really why a lot of businesses fail is they're either a good technician or maybe they're a good business owner, but not necessarily both. So it sounds like you got a leg up definitely early on, and then the formal education to help you to refine that really.
Yeah, and I think I also see it as a kind of a barrier to growth because I think sometimes ignorance is bliss for some of these business owners that don't know anything about the fixing of HVAC stuff. So they're just, we're a sales organization. That's what we're going to do, and that's not how we're built. So I struggle from a growth standpoint of uh, I like the hard stuff. I like fixing hard problems and doing complicated projects, but it's hard to scale that. So,
Yeah.
as a result, we've not grown tremendously, but we have maintained a, good reputation and a steady business. And we, instead of being solely, retail sales, residentially focused, we try to specialize in some of these other things to fill the peaks and valleys. Whereas, the old days it was, oh, we would take these new construction, apartments or whatever condos and fill the peaks and valleys with that. So yeah, our business is different in the way that I like hydronics and radiant floor and geothermal and, you know, tough stuff. And so we've created a niche in that market.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely one of the first people I knew in this market that was doing geothermal systems and certainly geo paired with radiant floors. I mean, that you just don't see that very often. And then I know you've done some pretty cool, bigger commercial projects. Um, and I don't know if you want to touch on some of those unique projects that you've done, but I think one of them had to do with like the Galt House's geothermal system or something like that.
No, we didn't do anything. So I guess like back up, we when I got into the business, at that point we were doing kind of new construction condo stuff for some core clients. We weren't really making any money doing it. And then we would try to do all the residential stuff. When the mold kind of deal became an issue and all homeowners lost mold coverage and contractors lost mold coverage, we decided as a business to, invest in, well, how do we learn how to not get ourselves in these situations? Again, I said we were active in ACCA and Air Conditioning Contractors of America. And so we'd go to those
Yeah,
conferences every year. And we got involved with a company called Comfort Institute, which were, my understanding is kind of, they were at the forefront of this blower door testing and teaching contractors whole home kind of building performance stuff. And I
right.
just remember sitting in a conference room up in Chicago somewhere, and about day two out of three, I'm like calling my dad, just be like, "Stop! Just don't do anything. Don't let him install anything else," because a lot of the things we just didn't know. We didn't know. So um, that kind of gave me inspiration to, okay, let's differentiate ourselves and become, building science experts, and we'll do blower door tests when we go out and do residential uh, kind of estimates. And so we did that for a while because I was always a young guy that was going in behind these older guys trying to sell stuff. And it was
Yeah.
tough for me to go in and be like, well, your system's really oversized, when they had two or three other guys come in that were twice my age telling them that it was fine.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong
So
here.
yeah, right. So, but yeah, we were doing it. We were doing the, load calcs and everything, load door tests. And anyway, so, the local utility eventually started doing them for basically free, and kind of took some of the wind out of that sales, but that was fine. Right. And I think by that time you were kind of in the mix and all that kind of thing. So I at
Yep.
least, I kind of knew how to go into these homes and look at them in the right way. And then I could refer them to you or whatever else to still be the expert and do things the right way. So,
Yeah.
all that kind of set us up for, well, me anyways, like, as being more technically focused, and um being kind of energy focused and technically focused. I would have clients that would come in and ask us for you know, we want the most efficient thing. And so the first project, I guess, I mean, we did some residential geothermal projects, but when the local Mercedes dealership was doing a renovation, we converted that whole thing to geo, which was a big commercial project. And then they built a Mini Cooper store that was same ownership next door, and it was brand new. And at that time,
Yeah.
BMW really was focused on sustainability and really wanted to see these dealerships, you know, get, I don't know, leads or whatever kind of certifications.
Yeah.
So those were the kind of the two bigger commercial projects we did. And after that, I guess it just kind of snowballed, because once you do like a design build project like that, then these big residents are just smaller versions of it kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, we so yeah, we would get these opportunities for these clients that knew we could execute these projects to come and ask us to do these designs. And we ended up I ended up meeting a guy out of Canandaigua, New York, that specialized in the hydronic side, and he would just manufacture stuff. So he could build these radiant panels that had the pumps and the valves and all those types of things. Um, and so I ended up creating a pretty good partnership with him, and we learned from each other, because I had more of the field, real world application side of it, but he
Yeah.
knew how to size all these pumps and valves and flow rates and all those things. So
Yeah.
that's really where, once we kind of teamed up, it just kind of snowballed from there, and we started off doing, a residence that was a $250,000 installation. And then they were 450 or 500. And then, I mean, we did up to $1.2 million residential installs with a kind of a central plant concept of chilled water, hot water, geothermal equipment all in one location, and then sending out the piping to different, whether it be a radiant floor or a air handler or a pool.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to wrap your mind around. I think most people would find it hard to wrap their mind around a $1.2 million residential HVAC system. But these are
Right.
large custom homes for affluent, people that want very specific setups and very specific design of their houses. So I know the one that I met you out on last year had like the radiant heat that was going out to the driveway and through the driveway and through the sidewalk and all that kind of stuff. And most houses don't get that kind of thing. And I would say most HVAC contractors have no idea how to even install or design something like that. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, that was, once again, it was, if you Google radiant floor heat in our area, we should be the first ones to come up. And even if somebody else comes up, you'll go to their site and very quickly realize that they really don't do that. Um, and so yeah, that builder came to us because the homeowner specifically wanted snow melt for whatever reason. He's building kind of his forever house, and he's an
Mm.
engineer, so he kind of knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And yeah, got in there, and originally he wasn't gonna do geothermal. He was gonna do forced air, gas furnaces, and AC units. And we're in the basement talking through like, okay, where are these boilers gonna vent? He's like, oh well, the furnace is gonna vent here. but there's all these complications with elevation on how they were getting the bids out. And it's like, why are you doing this? You're building this super efficient house.
Hey, before we get back to the video, if you're watching this to understand how to make your home more comfortable, healthy, and efficient, I have a great offer that you don't want to miss. I spent months creating the Home Comfort Advisor course to provide a simple yet comprehensive guide to understanding the fundamentals of building science and how to actually fix home comfort issues the right way without wasting time and money on stuff that doesn't work. So if you want to take your knowledge to the next level and finally get control of your home's issues, then head over to myhomecomfortadvisor.com to learn more and get signed up today. All right, now back to the video.
And
You're making it more complicated than it needs to be.
you're making it more complicated. Yeah. And it's interesting because that house, when it was under construction, I mean, we were heating and cooling the whole thing with like, I think like two 3.5 ton units, and it's like 12,000 square feet or something.
And that was an
It was
ICF
comfortable.
house, right? It's an
Yeah.
insulated concrete form house, so it's super insulated and super
Yeah.
tight. So those are really cool projects. I always enjoy going on those projects because you don't get to see them very often, and it's just you know, the uniqueness of how they frame them and how they lay out all the ductwork and just the design, and they're really cool. I don't know, I geek out on that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
you had touched on the humidity issues and mold and stuff like that, and over the last couple of years, it's really been a big problem. In the Midwest and the South, it seems like all over the country, we just have higher dew points and more humidity, more rain. I don't know if it's just my anecdotal, experience with this, but the last couple of years, especially, have just had a ton of issues with microbial growth and things like that. And I think that there's a big misunderstanding about why that stuff occurs in the first place, and I think there's also um, from a homeowner's perspective, there's a lack of awareness of like what you need to do when you're either a building a new house to avoid these kind of things from happening, or if you're in a house now that maybe you've been in for 5, 10, 15 years and all of a sudden it becomes an issue that wasn't there before. Like something has changed and it's not always just the environment and the weather. So how do you guys approach tackling these kind of issues at your company?
Yeah. So, there again, that was a evolution of learning because when you look at this equipment that's available to us on the market, like ERVs and HRVs and things like that, those manufacturers give you certain information on how that thing performs. But what I didn't really appreciate is that sometimes that information is a best case scenario and it's a snapshot in time, right? So,
Yeah.
um, I did this in my own home. We redid a house, put the best geothermal money could buy in. I insulated it, I tightened it up, and I put a ERV in because that's what you're supposed to
That's what you
do.
did. Yep.
And I could like in the summertime, I always find myself turning it off and turning the thermostat down to try to get the humidity down. And I remember I was at ACCA and I went to a seminar that was put on by Santa Fe or
Yep.
Ultra Air, and they had a contractor there that just kind of walked through how much moisture you can add to a house by bringing in air. And it was like, oh my God, like how did I not realize this, right? Like we're just loading these houses with moisture because we made them so efficient that now we don't need to run a lot of cooling, to maintain their indoor temperature.
Yeah.
However, every time I cook, I turn on my kitchen exhaust fan, and there's air coming in somewhere. So, um, yeah, so we subscribe to the uh, ventilating dehumidifier approach in this region a long time ago, just because you can't bring in outside air in the Ohio Valley without auxiliary dehumidification. Like I don't care what equipment you buy from an
Right.
HVAC perspective. But yeah, and to your point, like some of these homeowners, um, we could build a house and live there for 20 years. And I saw this a few years ago where a guy built a house, never had an issue, and then all of a sudden he started seeing like he could see the framing members on the ceiling of his big vaulted room, and it was
Mm,
probably mold growth, or it was either that or it was dirt or something. But the reality, the thing is it's like he had lived there this whole time and it never had been a problem. But that particular summer, we had just weeks of like mid 70 dew points.
yeah.
And so the thing there again, that the stepping back to like my learnings with Comfort Institute way back when, it's like they teach you all the science and like how the science works. Like things get cold enough and you get the moisture, things sweat, and then these problems happen. But the question is like, why hasn't it been a problem? Like I know this is the way it works, but yet we used to install ductwork in these attics and we would insulate the duct, but we wouldn't insulate the boots because we knew that the insulator was going to come blow insulation over it. Well,
They
that doesn't
should.
work. Well, that doesn't work because there's no vapor barrier, right? Like, so,
Right. Yeah.
theoretically those boots should sweat, but there again, we did this for years and years and years and it never became an issue. Um, but it will, right? Eventually with the perfect conditions that make it all happen. But,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean,
I mean,
I try to size things right. And then always like I in a new home, a ventilating dehumidifier is not an option for us. Like that's just part of the package.
yeah. Yeah, the sweating boots and the registers are like the first indication usually that homeowners see that there's something wrong. They're like, why is there water droplets on the underside of my registers on the ceiling and it's never been there before? There must be something wrong with the air conditioners. And it's, you know, that may or may not be true, but to your point, like the metal boot that goes through the ceiling a lot of times is still not insulated by the HVAC contractor that has, you know, the proper duct insulation with the vapor barrier on it, and they're just relying on the blown in fiberglass or the cellulose that that's blown into the attic to insulate that boot. But those fibrous materials still allow the moisture and the heat and the air to move through it. And so then it hits a cold surface, it starts sweating down the boot, it hits the drywall, it materializes on the ceiling. And, you know, I see that a lot, unfortunately, even in very large, custom, expensive houses. And it's like, man, you know, you spent all this money on a brand new house and you went with the cheapest HVAC contractor who doesn't understand building science. And here, this is the result of it. So it's, you know, a little bit of attention to detail on the front end and understanding this kind of stuff and explaining it, why you're doing these things on the front end and, you know, putting yourself out there as the expert, the local expert who can avoid these kind of issues or fix them after the fact. But it's always cheaper to plan for it and design it on the front end rather than trying to fix it on the back end. Um,
Yeah,
it could get
especially
real
when
expensive.
yeah, and especially when people don't have room for some of this equipment after the fact because they thought all they needed was an air handler and a small room with a filter on the side of it.
Right.
But yeah, and that's how you get to these big numbers. Like when we went to when we were doing these huge custom houses, it's like, well, if you really want it the right way, like we're gonna do ventilating HRVs for all your bathrooms and stuff. So you end up with all this extra hardware. Um, Instead of spending whatever $300 on a bathroom, like a nice bathroom exhaust fan, you're spending 8 grand for a ventilating dehumidifier that can, or not ventilating dehumidifier, like a HRV that can, change the air in this bathroom, 8 times an hour. Uh, it's just, it can add up. And that is, I guess, kind of the unfortunate part is we just build these houses super efficient. And unfortunately, we are making them more complex. It is
Yeah.
just more expensive to treat them right.
Yeah. I think, you know, most of the houses that get built around here are just production style, you know, two by fours, fiberglass, nothing special. But I think, you know, I did energy code compliance inspections for a long time, blower door testing and duct leakage testing, energy ratings and stuff like that. And these builders just, you know, their method of ventilation is a constant run exhaust fan that depressurizes the house and unfortunately also brings in outside hot humid air into that house, making the house more humid, more uncomfortable. And they, you know, instead of doing a ventilated dehumidifier or a supply only method or just, hey, we don't actually need this to run all the time, they're doing it because they're either trying to meet some kind of a code or a maybe an Energy Star standard to get a tax credit, which is going away now. But they cause all these other issues that they weren't prepared for, and then they have no understanding of how to fix. And when you explain to them that, hey, you use this type of ventilation method that's really not a great ventilation method to begin with, and oh by the way, you've created all these other problems, you know, they're looking back at the HVAC company now. They're like, well, why didn't you tell us this was going to be a problem on the front end? And so I think a lot of times the HVAC companies get blamed for these comfort issues and these humidity problems that are also driven by air infiltration or a poorly insulated house. And so, how do you deal with that kind of stuff? Like you can't just take the blame for other people's responsibilities all the time. There's got to be at some point, there's got to be some kind of education. Like, you know, you also didn't air seal the house properly. Like, what do you tell
Well,
these
and
people?
yeah, and that's tough. So, you know, back to the Comfort Institute training, thank goodness we had that because that gave me the tools to solve these issues. So, I always go back and check my work. Like, okay, is the load right? Did I miss something? You know, is that did I get it right on the front end from a sizing perspective? Um, and then two, I've got these little hobo data loggers, right? Like, so normally instead of saying, "Oh, homeowner, you're crazy," I'll be like, let's launch some data loggers and let's see, on these big fancy high end houses where we have energy management systems, we have all that built into the software. So I can just set up data charts and we can see exactly what the house is doing. But a
Yeah,
lot of times you don't have that. So we'll launch data loggers. Um, and then we'll go in and start looking. And sometimes you gotta try not to step on toes. I remember one specifically that was tough because the homeowner was tough too. I mean, fortunately, we work with mostly good homeowners that'll give us a chance to fix things and to
yeah,
make it right. But we had one where this was an old uh, stucco house, built in the 20s, and I told him out of the gate, it's like this house is tall. You're taking a steam boiler out. You're going to put in forced air, like buoyant forced air heating, and this thing's a big chimney. Like you should really, while you're doing all this work to the house, you should drop the drywall on this third floor and foam it. No, they didn't do that. So we get through this remodel, and like the first cold weather comes, and I'm getting these nasty emails from the homeowner like, we can't keep the first floor above 60 degrees. And I could see their, wireless thermostats. And I'm like, yeah, they can. But then when you looked at it a little deeper, it's like, okay, both first floor units are running continuously. And the second, third floor unit, it's not come on. Like it's just not
right.
running.
Yep.
And so I went back to the builder, the builder or the contractor. I'm like, listen, like I've done the math. Like I've done the load counts. Like from this point, I have no way to tell you what you need to heat this house. Like all I know is put the biggest furnace we can buy in the basement, just let it rip. But that's not the answer. Like you need to have a blower door test done so that you can figure out where this air's coming in. And oh no, no, no. We'll just put the furnace in. And I'm like, all right, well, so I just wrote an email kind of putting them on notice, like I'm done after this.
Yeah.
And then they came back. They're like, yeah, we had a little more money in the insulating budget, so we went ahead and I think you came in and found some stuff because it turned out they had freezing pipes too, like freezing
Mm,
pipes on a bathroom that was not on the outside wall, right? So there was air coming through this house in all kinds of ways. But
yeah.
that was one of those painful ones where it's like, what do you do? Like, because you're stuck between a general contractor that's trying to save face and a homeowner that doesn't care. They just want it fixed. They're uncomfortable.
Right.
Um, and so, yeah, sometimes that can get tricky. Luckily, um, it doesn't happen often because we don't get ourselves in a situation where we're doing lots of new construction homes and just doing them the cheapest way. Like we just don't. Usually, if we're doing a new project, we're doing it's exotic. Like for instance, the one with that uh, snow melt. We also have a Fantech uh, makeup air system for the range. So whenever they turn that range on, it opens a damper and it starts to bring in air, introducing it to the house, and it reheats the
Yep.
air in the wintertime. That was
Yep.
a very expensive part, but I mean, that's the only way that you could run a 1200 CFM exhaust fan in your kitchen and not create all kinds of other problems. But
Yeah.
that was kind of non-negotiable. It was like an $8,000 addition to that project. But
Yeah. I mean, that in itself brings up a whole nother conversation about like the complete lack of need for 1200 CFM of range hood capacity in anybody's house. Like, I don't care how much cooking you're doing, that is just way too much. And you see it all the time in these custom homes. They love to put in these giant range hoods and they depressurize the house like almost like a whole house fan would do in the old school days. And if you've got atmospherically vented gas appliances or a gas water heater, old school gas furnace or something like that, you are going to blow out that pilot light. You're going to backdraft the water heater. You're going to bring flue gas into your house. I had a call from a builder this summer that was dealing with that. And he was like, the chimney, the fireplace, basically, it'll just pull air down the chimney every time they run the range hood. And I'm like, you have to either bring in the makeup air, open a window or something, or, I don't know. I don't know if those things
Was
can be
that in
like dampered
acreage?
down. I never even went out to the house. I kind of explained to him over the phone what I thought the problem was, and he never called me back again. But um,
We just put one of those systems in for a general contractor that, um, for that same issue, that every time they, and it's tough too, because even he's like, when I turn our bathroom exhaust fan, we smell it. So the general contractor's position on it was, well, did we install it to code? And the answer was no, because if you read the code for bathroom, for kitchen exhaust, it just says anything over 400, you have to bring in outside air. And it says that it has to be, I can't remember the exact verbiage, I mean, has to be like 80% or equal to what you're exhausting, which I didn't realize it was that detailed. I thought it was just very vague, but it wasn't. So yeah, that general contractor ended up paying us to put in I think it was like a 750 CFM intake. No heat on that one, but it was a big
and again, I mean, if you're
expense
doing
for
that
the
in the
contractor.
summertime, you're just sucking in tons of outside air, humidity, dust, all that stuff that comes with it. If it's not filtered, if it's not dehumidified, and the whole purpose of why you're doing this is just to get the moisture out of your kitchen, like it just seems like way overkill. And I don't know. The consumer
Yeah,
education aspect of it is really difficult because most of them don't really care, to be honest with you. They want to have the fancy stuff in their house. They want it to look pretty. They want it to function properly, and they just want to be comfortable. And they're like, I don't want to learn building science, and I don't want to know every aspect of construction. I'm hiring you to do this, and why isn't it working properly? And so that's when builders really get stuck between a rock and a hard place, where if they're not educating themselves and learning at least the fundamentals of building science and kind of how moisture moves and airflow moves and sizing of equipment and stuff like that, they can get some really big problems that cost them a lot of money.
yeah, yeah, they can. And this guy, I had to explain that to him. Like, there's a slippery slope, because once we put this thing in, you're gonna have humidity challenges in the summertime. Like, you're just gonna. There's no way
Yeah.
around that. And of course, they're part of, well, we'll never run it on high and this, that, and the other. It's like, all right, well, it's it's a cascade of issues when, yeah, when you go that route. I mean, but we're doing a little ICF house right now that is literally, probably 1,000 square foot house, but it's so tight. Like, it is built super efficient. And even though they're going to have just a regular 390 CFM hood, if they want it to work, we still need to bring in some level of outside air. So we'll use the same technology that Fantech uses on theirs, where we're just using a current sensing relay that when it senses any current being pulled from that exhaust fan, it'll close contacts, and we can at least open a damper for that.
Yeah.
So, but that house will have a whole house dehumidifier on it, so that if it starts to load the house with moisture, we'll be able to recover and bring the house back to where it needs to be.
Yeah. So now we're in the middle of the winter time. It's January 2nd, I guess, today. And we don't really have a problem with humidity as much. It's more about dry air. And now you're in the humidifying seasons. And so what are some of the common issues that you're running into with your clients, people calling you out, and how are you approaching those this winter and explaining kind of, here's the source of your problem, here's some solutions to it. um, what are you running into right now?
Well, it's interesting, because I used to think that, humidifiers and things like that were nice to haves, kind of premium accessories, if you will. after COVID, we learned a lot about, well, there's health issues with having really dry air, right? So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, air quality becomes a factor. So we have a lot of clients that don't know they have a problem until we install a new system, and now their thermostat shows humidity, right? And like now they're just like, oh, why's my hair so dry? Well, it's always been dry, now, but now they want a solution. Um, we generally
Just the
lead with
awareness.
like a yeah, we generally lead with like an evaporative style, just Honeywell humidifier. I mean, that's the other conversation you have to have with clients is there's no free lunch with humidification. We got to pull water. If we pull hot water, it evaporates in the air more efficiently, but it's also going to eat valves up faster because there's higher mineral content in those in the hotter water. So now, we hook up to cold water because the extra capacity isn't worth the uh
The problems.
the problems that are associated with these valves failing every 5 years or 3 years or whatever it is. So you have wear and tear and just extra expense with that. Just you're gonna, if you're using it, it's gonna eventually clog up. Um, and then, sometimes if they have a really big house and they need a lot of capacity, we'll go steam. But once again, that's basically putting a little 3.5 kW strip heater that's boiling water. So there's energy consumption associated with it, on top of the cost. But the reality is that if one is concerned about health and comfort, they should have a humidifier if their house is of average, construction type. It used to be when we built these super tight houses, like, oh, you don't need a humidifier because you create enough moisture in the house. Well, yes, until we start adding all this fresh air, to a home. So I've even seen where you build super efficient houses and they still need it because if we're taking care of the fresh air requirements, well, you're going to be bringing in dry air too. So, um,
Yeah. I know one of the first things I generally will hear about if somebody calls and they're complaining about dry air is they'll say, "Well, I noticed that the crown molding is starting to gap and crack. The caulk's cracking, or maybe the doors aren't shutting properly, or the wood floors are, acting weird, stuff like that." And so that's these symptoms are what they recognize first, but they don't understand the underlying cause for them. And to your point about, you know, probably most houses need a humidifier, especially older houses, but probably most older houses also need to be air sealed more. And, the air leakage of these older houses is allowing for this dry, cold air to come into them, which makes it feel more dry and more uncomfortable. So you don't necessarily want to try to fix this problem by it's like a band-aid, right? If you put a
yeah.
humidifier on a super leaky house, then it's really just a band-aid. You need to seal up the house as best you can, cost effectively, and then add the humidification from that point so that you're not just wasting money and time.
Yeah, the analogy I use is it's like, well, if you have a car and the brakes stuck on it, do you put in a bigger engine or do you fix the brakes, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that is, it's like you go to a house and they've got a crawl space that's vented and it's like, well, yeah, no kidding. Like your house leaks like a sieve. Like, that you've got all these holes in between there. So, and that is where we usually start is, hey, the tighter you make this house, the easier it is for us to maintain this environment. You still will probably
Right.
need these things, but you'll get a lot more out of them and they'll be a lot more useful and last longer. So that's absolutely correct. And that's why we like to send you guys lots of homes to test just to, because sometimes it's one thing for me to tell them, well, this leaks and you probably got this here. And it's another thing for you to go in there with a blower door and infrared camera and show them the light,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah.
So,
The infrared light for sure. So if there was like one or two things that you wanted to tell a homeowner before you got to the house, like common tips or tricks or like things to be aware of, what would be like the top, couple things that you would tell them?
well, I mean, of course, usually we're getting called for comfort or the type of situations I mean, other than like, oh, my furnace is broken or whatever. But if I'm getting calls, it's usually something more complex. But um, yeah, we usually just tell them that, we're if you got humidity issues, like, do you notice how long your system runs in the summertime? Most people don't realize that when you size it properly, it should run a lot, like almost
Yeah, they
constantly on the
complain
hottest
when it's
days.
running all the time.
Right. And they'll think that's a problem. And it's funny how many customers are like, I've lived in this house for 25 years and I never really paid attention. And then, of course, we will lead with if your goal is, air quality and low utility bills. And we get a lot of that. Like we have a reputation for, doing the sizing properly and looking at like manual or on the equipment selection stuff to make sure it's really getting the rating that they think they're buying. Um, and so a lot of times we have to have that conversation of, well, equipment's only going to get you so far. You can buy a Ferrari, but if you live on a gravel road, it's not going to
Yeah.
perform the way you want to perform. So a lot of that is a warm up to uh, have them in the right state of mind when we come in there and look at their house in a different way than most of the other box sales people would,
Yeah,
if you
I mean,
will.
that's a great point because, a lot of people think that the HVAC equipment is the system, that furnace or that air conditioner is the system, but they're missing the other half of the system, which is the ductwork. And if the ductwork's not sized properly and moving the air properly, they're never going to get the performance that they thought they were going to.
Oh yeah, I went into one a week or two ago where they're going to do an addition, and the question is they just put in a new system. Can it handle this addition? And I
Right.
went and looked at this thing, and it's like a 4-ton machine, and it might have had 2 tons of duct on it, maybe. And in the old days when you didn't have these expansion valves, those systems would freeze up, and they'd be problems like out of the gate. And it seems like now with the different evaporator coils and metering devices, that these systems are a little more kind of can tolerate that stuff, but you're not getting the capacity out of them. So they're certainly not getting what they think they're not getting what they paid for.
Yeah.
So so yeah, you're absolutely right. Like a lot of times what we find is if the homeowners do the stuff to make their home more in an older home, if they do the stuff to make the home more efficient, then we can usually size aggressively. And if we size aggressively, we can drop a half a ton, maybe even a ton sometimes on the unit size. And then you find that existing ductwork performs better. And that's
Yeah.
over the years has kind of been our tact is like, well, do you want to put in a brand new duct system, or would you rather get your attic spray foamed and take that system out of the thermal envelope, and now it'll perform and it'll work okay. So it's like, yeah, do you want to use horsepower or do you want to use finesse, kind of thing?
Right. Yeah, and especially in the neighborhood that you're in, the older part of Louisville. I mean, there's a ton of houses that were built with only heating in mind, and those duct systems were designed for heating only. And then at some point in
Yeah,
time, they started adding air conditioners, and then they started upsizing equipment, and now everything's oversized for the duct work. And so, if you're just a general, you know, one of these big HVAC companies that's owned by, private equity, and you're just trying to sell boxes every day, they're not thinking about that kind of stuff, and they're not testing the static pressure in the duct system, and so they don't understand that you can't just swap a box out or upsize it and try to force more air through a duct system that can't take it in the first place. So it's
yeah.
the duct system's super important.
And then you see mini splits popping up everywhere because those are that's the kind of band-aid, if you will. And sometimes those are the right solutions, but our our tact on the older homes has always been, yes, you're correct. The duct system was designed for heating. And if we look at a 2-story house and we do a load calculation on it, you need a higher quantity of air on those second floor beds for cooling than you do in heating, right? So
Right.
when you do that load calc, it kind of shows you the highest number you need, which means like you're never going to be comfortable unless you have a thermostat on both floors. But often what we'll find is that these homes really don't have a capacity problem. I mean, somebody put in an air conditioner big enough to cool the whole house. They just don't have either the duct systems to accommodate it or the controls to accommodate it.
Right.
What we'll do a lot, if we can, is we'll add zoning to that. And so to your point, I mean, you're only going to get so much through those ducts. So, A, can you make it easier to heat and cool that second floor with insulation or air sealing. And then B, like, would you rather add a whole new system, or are you okay with a solution that is going to get it done 90% of the time? Right. And when I say 90% of the time, it is, if it's a design 95-degree day and you go up there to take a nap on your second floor at, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, is it going to be 68 degrees? Maybe not, but it probably will be by the time the sun goes down. Right.
Yeah.
So with the zoning and duct sealing, we can often fix these older homes to a reasonable state that's usually acceptable to most people, and instead of just adding capacity to it. But it is a
Yeah.
holistic approach. It is not just, oh, here's the best, furnace and air conditioner Bryant makes. Like, it is looking at equipment and then pairing that with controls that will complement it to be able to maximize its ability.
Yeah, the biggest caveat that I see with adding a zone system to an existing house, there's two things really. Most of the time, the return side of the ductwork is too small. Even in new construction, it's just a plague for whatever reason. They don't put enough return air going back to the equipment, and then if you don't have the right type of equipment that has variable speed blowers and multiple, output capacity and stuff like that, and then you add a zone system on it where you're choking off maybe half of that ductwork that already isn't getting enough airflow,
Oh yeah.
it's not going to work as you think it's going to. So like, and then when you use what we see around in the Midwest all the time is these panned in return ducts that are wall cavities and floor cavities. Maybe they run from the basement all the way up to the second floor through interior walls. And they're just taking a 2x4 wall cavity that's 3.5 inches thick and 14.5 inches wide. And they're expecting the air to come from the second floor all the way back down to the basement and get circulated. And they're super leaky because it's drywall and it's wood and it's not sealed unless you do something like an aeroseal application. But again, the size
Yeah.
of that duct going to the second floor is super important. And a lot of times it's just not possible to increase the size of those ducts going to the second floor. So then you're talking about, a second system, like you're saying, or maybe it's a mini split, but it's
Think-
tough. I mean, sometimes zone systems work, but you got to have these other things that you consider when you're thinking about it.
right. And everything you're saying is correct. And it's funny what we'll see, like just the things that people try to get more return on a second floor, right? Like, you'll go in and they're like, well, we tried this, we tried that. And you're looking at this return that went through all these cavities and things. You're like, well, it's, by the time they did all that, it's really not doing anything. And
Yeah,
return air doesn't cool spaces, cold supply air does, right? So often what we'll do, instead of trying to, you know, jump through hoops to get return out there, is we'll do transfer systems. So and once again, we're dealing with where a perfect solution is not in the cards, right? Like, you're
right.
not going to get a perfect solution. So how do you make this thing better? Um, and a lot of the times with a two-story home, if they can't really spray foam because it's they're not going to deconstruct their second floor to accommodate that. Um,
Right.
Sometimes it comes down to, we need to put transfer grill system in. Sometimes that is, a common duct in an attic, and then so we can attenuate noise and things. And then they have to keep the doors closed, because if we just pump cold air out there, it's going to fall down the steps as fast as we're pumping it up, and we can have an effect of sucking hot, humid air in from a leaky attic. But like I say, most of the time, if we can train the customer how to use the house. I mean, we've been able to fix these things in these old homes. And once again, it's not a perfect solution, but in my view, adding a second system in an attic where it's not serviceable, and now you have a system on the first floor that's sized for the whole house, and you added
It's
another
way
system
too
on the
big.
second floor, and so you get
Yeah.
all this equipment. um, I've found over the years that we can get it really good, or good enough, which I think is more appropriate for an old home. Now, if we're
Right.
designing a new house or we're doing a remodel, no, we don't do it that way. We'll usually if they've got an old home and they're adding square footage to it, we'll do a first floor system and a second floor system, and then encourage the homeowner to somehow keep that system inside the thermal envelope if it's possible and feasible. But yeah, we like I said, we get into a lot of old people calling us with problems and they want solutions. And so to your point, the correct equipment that will run at a lower speed when only one zone's calling is critical. And so I'll tell homeowners that, maybe they're buying a new system and they want to zone it someday. Well, it's like the equipment you buy today makes more of a difference now if that is something you want to do in the future. So normally I'd say, okay, high end system, eh, it's like heated leather seats. It's nice, it's quieter, it dehumidifies better. Is it really going to save you money and pay for itself? Not usually, not in this area where we have still pretty low utility rates. But if you're going to zone this thing, now I think that now we're not even going to offer you the lower end because to your point, it's just not going to work with the zone system. Um,
Yeah.
so people, I see where that gets messed up a lot. And it's like, yeah, it's noisy. No kidding, it's noisy. No kidding, it's cycling all the time. Like you can't run 4 tons on a ton and a half of ductwork.
Yeah, the old analogy of, I like to use, trying to swim underwater with a straw instead of a snorkel, and you're just not gonna be able to breathe properly. You're gonna die.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate it, man. How can people get a hold of you if they're in the Metro Louisville area and they want you to come help them with their problems?
Right. So I mean, there's lots of good information on our website, www.anroth.com, ANROTH.com. And of course, there's a contact us link there. If you want service, you can always email us at servicedesk@anroth.com, or you can call us at during normal business hours, or if it's after hours, answering service would answer. But 589 heat or 589 cool, area code 502. Um, it's another way you can get a hold of us.
Right on, man. Well, I'm sure I'll have you on here again. You're always a wealth of knowledge, and I definitely appreciate the relationship and the work that we've done together. And I think more people locally, especially, need to understand this kind of stuff because you're one of the few that really does and does the work. That's I just see way too many big, private equity owned companies that are just selling the cheapest boxes they possibly can and ignoring all the stuff that we're talking about. And they're the ones that are causing these problems. So thank
Yeah.
you for being one of the champions in the industry and being the one that's out there leading the charge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll leave it on, we do and like to do these big radiant floor jobs and sophisticated jobs, but our bread and butter is just furnace and air conditioner replacements. And when we do those, we try to do them better than our competition because we have a full scale sheet metal shop where we can make our fittings and we'll put turning vanes and the return drops to make them move the air better. We'll use a standard 20 by 25 by 1 filter, but most of the time we're putting in like a MERV 11 Honeywell media filter, and all these things are what we consider to be just like a base install
Yep.
to make it a serviceable system because like yeah, your air quality is important, but you just spent a bunch of money for this new system and you at least want to protect that. So sticking a little
Yeah.
bitty filter on the side of it, which is what a lot of these companies will do, out of ignorance, I think, is not, I guess, just buyer beware. All installed HVAC systems are not equal. It's an applied product, so at least make sure that they're using the better practices to install it.
Yeah. 100% true. Yeah. The air filtration is so important and the size of the filter and the MERV rating. And I mean, I'll never install another system that doesn't have a media filter on it at the minimum. So
Yep.
good stuff,
All right,
man.
Eric.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
I'll be talking to you soon and on to the next one, brother.
See you.